What are we talking about? Mr. Polman.
Exactly that, yes. We're going to talk about one of the most connected, powerful, and influential men on the entire planet, a man you've probably never heard of, but who is working day and night behind the scenes to radically reshape British society, especially our food system. Who is it? It's this fella, Paulus Gerardus Josephus Maria Polman, KBE. I'm going to call him Paul Polman, or maybe even just Polman for the sake of brevity in the broadcast. Who is he? If we have a look at his LinkedIn profile, he tells us that he was nearly a priest. And I'm going to wager that that was in the Catholic Church, and I'll let you interpret what I mean by that. He's an international business leader. If we could just click on one, we can see that he spent 40 years in the food industry, rising to the very top levels. He spent 27 of those years at Procter & Gamble, rising to Group President of Europe. He then spent 3 years at Nestlé as CFO and President of Americas before taking the top job at Unilever, where he spent a decade delivering purpose-driven change. This guy has really defined the business landscape over the past 10 or 15 years. He made a big shout in his Unilever tenure about decoupling economic growth from environmental impact, and he's really been at the forefront of driving the climate and sustainability narrative. And he now spends his time going around the world lecturing humanity on how to live. Let's have a little listen to what he has to say.
The two biggest challenges that need to be addressed are climate change and inequality. And frankly, they're closely related. We see that we're at the point where the cost of inaction is actually higher than the cost of action, to the point that we're starting to ask ourselves the question, what the heck are we doing? And we're sleeping on the wheel. Although we're driving, we're clearly not driving fast enough. We're heading for 3.5, 4 degrees, and we're sitting here as if nothing happens. We're far behind on the global goals as well. Now, we might all be fine, but there will be a hell of a lot more people dying. There will be a heck of a lot more poverty in this world. I don't want to be responsible for that. Anytime you know that you're polluting and put carbon in the air, there's someone else going to die. Anytime you know you're wasting food, there's someone else going to die. It is our problem. We're living on that same planet. And if we don't find a way to live in harmony with our fellow citizens, it's not going to work. We don't need more PhDs. We don't need more people to go to Pluto or Mars to find the answer. What we need is human willpower. And the simple question to ask ourselves is, do we really care? Ladies and gentlemen, we belong to the 2% of the world population that has won the lottery ticket of life. And that brings us to goal number 17 of the SDGs. A goal that is called partnership. It's a partnership for humanity. It's a partnership for the common good. It's a partnership where we put the interest of others ahead of our own. In the course of history, there comes a time when humanity is called upon to shift to a new level of consciousness. It clearly is the moment to do this. You're actually doing something for generations to come. You're a real leader. You're a real leader by simply bringing humanity back to business. My simple request to you is live a life with purpose. Thank you very much.
What a rousing speech, Ben. I love the music.
Yeah, quite. Do you know what? I'm actually going to jack it all in and buy myself an SDG pin and go and hang around with Paul Polman and do whatever he wants. So I was almost in tears there. And that's essentially what he's spending his time doing, right? So he spent 40 years in business, but he's now a vocal proponent of the SDGs, and he does that in a formal capacity, right? So this is one of the, as I said at the start, one of the best connected people on earth. Like, this is a completely crazy number of roles that he currently holds, right? He's got 20 different concurrent positions listed on his LinkedIn profile, and these are just the ones that he talks about publicly. So I'm just going to whip through these very quickly, but I'll skim over some of them, but they're really fascinating when you look into the totality of this and what he sits at the center of, right? So he's an author. He has a book called Net Positive. This is his big thought leadership platform. He's also an advocate emeritus of the SDGs. It's a formal position at the UN. He's also vice chair of the UN Global Compact, which describes itself as the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. He's a board member of Systemic, which is a consulting and technology business focused on systemic change across all industries. He was also a founding investor in their private equity fund. I'm going to talk about them in another show. They're a fascinating organization. He's also a board member at the Rockefeller Foundation. If we can click on one, we can see that he is also chair of Oxford Said Business School. So that aligns up quite neatly with what Debbie and Cheryl were just talking about. Oxford is right at the centre of a lot of this stuff. He is a member of the Director General's Business Advisory Group at the World Trade Organization. He is the chair of the Global Advisory Board at One Young World, which is a youth charity whose patron is Meghan Markle. And there is also a partner with My Life, My Say, who we've spoken about a lot previously. We can flick on one more. We can see that he is the co-chair of the Food and Land Use Coalition, a global advisor to SMBC Group, which is a big Japanese bank, a member of the Global Advisory Board of Temasek, which is a Singapore state-owned conglomerate, leader of something called the B Team, which we're going to talk about separately. Fascinating group that he's part of there. He actually helped found it, was the chair. He's a friend of COP26, so he's all about climate action. And he is the co-founder and chair emeritus of something called Imagine, which I'll come back to in a minute. But before I do, Mike, you've thrown something at me. I'm going to throw something back at you. 20 concurrent roles. Like, what do you make of all of that?
Well, he's clearly a very, very special person and a global leader. I mean, it is not possible for anybody to actually take an active role in 20 different roles like that. So these are, but on the other hand, he's clearly right at the center of a network, and so the question is, what is that network up to? Yeah,
quite exactly. I'd imagine he's got an army of helpers running around him the whole time. And here we're going to talk about a bunch of them now. I'm going to run through a little bit about this organization, Imagine, which was the last one on the list, last but not least. So what is it? So it's a group of disruptors and change makers. They were sung into existence in 2019 at the MoMA by a collective of space transformers. Right, so they were sung into existence at moments. This kind of ceremonial creation of this entity. Now, on Monday, Mark was talking about Bilderberg, and Marie Jose Kravis, who is the wife of I can't remember his first name, Kravis from KKR, the private equity gurus. She's the chair of the Museum of Modern Art. So she's the co-chair of the Bilderberg meeting. She's the chair of the Museum of Modern Art. I think there might well be a connection there between this organisation, Imagine, and the Bilderberg meetings, which we'll talk about that when they come up again in a couple of weeks. They're also very closely linked to the World Economic Forum, especially the Young Global Leader Programme. Right, so this is the core team at Imagine. You have Valerie Keller, who was a former executive director of global markets at EY, who I talked about last week, Jan Janowski, who is a private equity guy, Sylvia Weisner, who's big in top level executive recruitment. They were all young global leaders, right? So that's nearly half of the team, the young global leaders. And finally, David Eichmann, who's the guy in the cowboy hat, who actually worked at the World Economic Forum, and he ran the Young Global Leaders Program and the Global Shapers Community and the Technology Pioneers Program and the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship at the World Economic Forum, right? So this organization is absolutely in the center of the WEF, as well as all the other organizations that we've talked about. So what are they up to? So it's all for good, of course, right? So they did this thing called the Fashion Pact, which they launched with Emmanuel Macron, which brought together 60 different organizations from across the fashion industry. They also have this thing called the Food Collective, which is about convening stakeholders from food and agriculture to drive dialogue, ambition, and collective action, right? And how does that manifest? Well, it manifests at a national level in this organization, which came to my attention a couple of weeks ago. It's been going for about 2 years now. It's called the Food, Farming and Countryside Commission, but they've just sparked into life, become much more active, and started issuing public statements. In particular, this thing called the Hope Farm Statement, which was issued by Paul Polman and a group of people from across the private and public sectors, civil society, all that kind of thing. They say, together, we're calling for the next UK government as a matter of urgent national priority, starting in its first 100 days, to implement a bold national food and farming strategy for the UK, drawing on the wealth of evidence available, including the National Food Strategy, which I'll come back to. They have 6 core recommendations: legally binding targets and policy coherence, increased public as well as private sector funding to support farmers, robust public procurement standards with tighter regulation, multifunctional land use framework, fair and consistent standards, and then also, importantly, measurement and disclosure frameworks for accountability. So they actually want to control what's going on across the whole farming sector. You should go and read the statement. It's not particularly long, but it will give you a good idea of what these people are up to. One of the signatories, and there are a bunch of them, all listed in the statement. You can go and read it yourself. But one of them was Henry Dimbleby, another name which has come up again. That came up earlier, so we'll talk about that in extra. So he was the former UK food czar. He actually wrote the National Food Strategy. He was in the Times saying that the Hope Statement represents a fundamental quantum shift, a step change in the public discourse. He's personally, financially invested in this space. He actually launched a private equity fund to transform the global system. And when he wrote the National Food Strategy in 2021, he did that alongside BAIN, the global consulting firm, who talked about our food sector as a series of interconnected industrial processes. And one of the main things they were keen to reinforce was the idea that in farming, we need consolidation so that we have fewer big corporate players who are able to negotiate more effectively with the other participants in the industry, right? So this is all about commercialization, corporatization, big food, big money, all being distributed from the top level down by people like Paulus Gerardus, Josephus Maria Polman, and the organizations that he represents.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for that. Really interesting. Okay, now if you like what the UK column does, you would like to support us, you can do. It's only £5 a month. Please do support us at support.ukcolumn.org if you possibly can. We do need your help. You could share anything we find on the various platforms. And as we mentioned the other day, we are no longer apparently allowed to use Facebook because we've been locked out of Facebook. Vanessa Beeley told me after the news on Wednesday that the same thing has happened to her as well. So basically the page is still up, but we're no longer able to log into Facebook and add new content. So that is the way they seem to be dealing with us at the moment. But if you want to pick up something up at the UK Column shop to support us, that is another option as well. There are many items there. If you'd like to do that, that'd be much appreciated. Now, the second episode, or the second part of the interview that Alex did with Yuri Roska, is on the website now. If you'd like to, if you didn't see it yesterday at 1 p.m, do have a look at that. On Brian's YouTube channel at 11 a.m. on Sunday, he will be premiering the 4th episode of Walking the Dog. Join him for that if you possibly can. Well, the details of that will be in the show notes if you're not sure how to find that. On Sunday, then in the evening, we will be hosting. Now that the times on screen there are US times, so we'll be hosting a symposium called "From National Security